All right, so this is actually going to take me a long time to scroll all the way up. Guys, it is episode 76. We are going to be diving into some more Warhammer stuff, and we have a lot of notes today. There is a good chance, actually, there is a 100% chance that this is going to be a two-part episode. So episode 76 and episode 77 are going to be about the same topic, Rabute Gilliman. And that is hopefully the only time I will say his name fully in the correct way without saying something silly later on.
We would love for you guys to post in the comments your favorite way to say Rabute Gilliman's name wrong. Best comment, best mispronunciation of his name, we're going to pin in the comments.
Sick.
I should also say there's a 100% chance that this is going to be 2 episodes, at least.
That's what I just said.
At least. Could be 3.
Oh, so you're saying it could be 3. I was like, you are just repeating exactly what I said.
Yes.
So what I said is it's going to be 2 episodes. Andrew is now saying, oh, it could be 3. Yeah, there's a chance for that. Considering the fact that I wrote like 6 pages of notes and haven't even gotten into like what's currently happening in the lore. So yeah, we might be here for a hot minute.
Yeah, I don't even think our notes got out of the Horus Heresy.
I wrote them all the way up until the resurrection.
Dude, let me tell you what, this is a little bit of a side note. Reading books, reading novels is not a good way to do research because it's very slow. But I've checked out so many Ultramarines books from the library, and now that we're going on vacation next week, I'm like, I have so many books to read. I'm so excited.
Nice.
I've been averaging 1 book a week this entire year, and I'm hoping to up that average just a bit while we're on vacation.
Sweet.
Welcome to Talk About Tatooine, where 2 white guys saw the inundated podcast scene of other white dudes mouthing off about their opinions and thought, one more couldn't hurt. Did you screen that, buddy?
Why would I? It's more fun when I don't.
What kind of unhinged stuff is he gonna say? For real, though, welcome to Talk About Tatooine. I'm Andrew.
I'm Nathan.
And we are twin brothers here to bring you what's new in nerddom and give colorful commentary on our favorite subjects. Welcome to our cantina. Grab a drink and settle in as we set course for realities beyond our own.
Welcome, everyone, to episode 76. Hopefully you guys tuned in to our episode 75 and a half, where we did a little bit of a State of the Galaxy. That should be up on YouTube and potentially our podcast platforms
yeah, we'll
as
put
well.
It there.
Today is June 22nd. I had to look around my microphone there for a second. And this is going to be released on, let me pull up my calendar, June 24th. So we're going to have a fun time with this, guys. First, big thanks to all of our patrons. We'll get into that here in just a little bit. But today we are talking about Rabute Gilliman. We're having a fun time with this, and we have a fun opening question for you. Andrew, do you mind if I go ahead and get us started with the opening question?
I hope you do. Please do.
Okay. So, question for you, and we would also love to hear some engagement in the comments as well, if you guys agree, disagree, or if you think you have a better answer. Now, our opening question is, who do you think would have been a better War Master instead of Horus? Andrew, go ahead and start us off.
So, almost the obvious answer would be Rabute Gilliman, but Gilliman is so entrenched in the worlds of Ultramar and being the Lord of Ultramar that I actually don't think he would be a good warlord. Or a good War Master, excuse me. I actually think Sanguinius would be the perfect fit.
Oh, please explain your answer.
Sanguinius is the closest Primarch we actually get to the Emperor out of any of his sons, in my opinion, as far as his wrath, his combat ability, but also his majesty, because just his literally being an angel and being able to go to certain worlds and just say, please, like seeing an angel descend from the skies, I think has a lot of weight to a human civilization cut off from Terra to say, oh, maybe these guys are the real deal and we maybe shouldn't fight them. And then if they do, he just, goes bananas and the Blood Angels just slaughter them because they're amazing.
That's true. They got a little bit of that bloodlust. So if I had to pick a War Master instead of Horus, I actually have 2 options, but I'll kind of explain the first one because I think it's someone I would like to have as War Master, but I don't think his brothers would agree. So my first answer would actually be Vulcan.
I knew you would say that. 100%. Of course.
Get out of my head.
You're a salamander stan all day.
So here's the thing, and we're going to talk about this actually a little bit later in our episode, is the worlds conquered by the Imperium vary in their rebelliousness based on the legion that conquered them.
Correct.
So like the World Eaters got so thoroughly destroyed that there wasn't really a chance of rebellion. But you also had, so they're on like one end of the spectrum. You had a bunch of legions in the middle that were just savages. They were like, civilian losses are okay. And then on the opposite end from that, you had like the Ultramarines and the Salamanders, where they're like, hey, maybe we don't kill everybody. Maybe we try to preserve these people because they're theoretically future Imperial subjects. And that's like kind of the tone they took with conquering planets during the Great Crusade. Now, I think Vulcan is the answer I would want, but I think this is a bad choice because I don't think his brothers respected his leadership style enough for him to be an effective war master.
Is that because they didn't think he was ruthless enough?
Yes. I think they thought Vulcan was too soft. There's a small amount of discord throughout the Horus Heresy series where he kind of gets like poked and jabbed at a little bit, or they make kind of like off the cuff comments about his style. I don't think that would be a good choice. Now, if I had to pick the most efficient choice outside of Horus, I would pick Perturabo.
Interesting.
Perturabo is a siege expert. This is why I think he would be a really great option. He's considered to be a good leader, a really excellent strategist. He's basically the one that's like, hey, I'm going to come up with the plan to take down Dorne at the Siege of Terra.
Yeah, he did all of the heavy lifting.
Here's what I think would make him the best war master is Perturabo had such a low tolerance for the beings of chaos that I think the Horus Heresy or the Perturabo heresy, it doesn't roll off the tongue, right?
No.
The Galactic Civil War would not have happened under his watch. Erebus would have come in and been like, all right, it's time to corrupt the War Master, Perturabo. And like Purdy probably would have just been like, you're such a and just like killed Erebus right there.
Gosh, I wish he would have.
Guess what? Like 60 books down the drain. Like, you know, I think he would have been good. And he would have made the Imperium so defensible that when additional scourge from aliens and Tyranids finally start happening, because the Tyranid swarm is canonically still going to attack the Imperium. Yep. When the beacon at Sotha gets activated, I think it's at Sotha. I'll have to remember that later. So
I'm going to say with unverified confidence, yes, it's at Sotha.
Yeah, so all you fact gremlins, you guys can pick apart this one. When that goes off, the end of that book marks the turning or the awakening of the Great Hive Fleet. They're like, ooh, look, shiny light. And they like start like gravitating towards it. And that's actually the moment, and it takes them 10,000 years to get to the Milky Way galaxy. So that's canon. That is going to happen regardless. So I think Perturabo being the one to fortify the Imperium would have been a really, really good choice.
That's horrifying.
Oh, it's one of my favorite parts. I actually read that like multiple times and listened to it because like just like listening to the reader go through like what's happening with the Great Devourer, I was like just giddy. I was like, oh, it's going down.
Oh, dude, it's amazing. I'm reading Leviathan right now and I'm like, ooh, this is good.
Yeah, it's real fun.
The Tyranids be like, oh, googly moogly, that thing is juicy.
I hate that you're talking in memes now, but that's all right.
Pharos.
All right, guys, we are going to get into our main Pharos. It's the Pharos device. You're right. Is the Pharos device on Sotha?
I don't know. I just know that book 34 is called Pharos, and I think that's where it comes up. Right, because it's got that one Imperial Fist dude, because it's called The Dying of the Light, written by Guy Haley.
Right, something like that.
Oh, it is Mount Pharos on Sotha.
Sweet. We got it.
Crushed it.
All right, guys. All the facts are there. Maybe not in the right order, but you guys will put it together.
Warhammer, Space Marine, Tyranid, Primarch. We said all the keywords. We got it.
We're going to be going through a couple of different questions today about Rabute Gilliman or Robot Gorilla Man, whatever you guys want to call. We're going to try to basically say his name in as many silly ways as possible. We're going to cover a couple of different questions here, guys, today, and we have quite a bit that we're not going to cover, so just make sure you guys stay tuned for that. We're going to talk about who is Rabute Gilliman. We're going to talk what historical events is he most noted for. That is a long, long section, and that's going to get broken up into multiple different historical periods, and that is going to take us probably all the way through into, like, we're probably not even going to touch all the historical marks. And then in the next episode, we're hopefully going to be talking about like what is currently going on with the Big G. So that's what we're going to be talking about. But we have so much to cover before we even get there. So we're going to be talking mostly about who is Rabute Gilliman, and we're going to be talking about some of his history as well. Let's get started. Keep in mind here, guys, RG, the G-Man, is the Primarch of the Ultramarines and is currently, in our current setting, the Lord Commander of the Imperium and Imperial Regent. Now, keep in mind, these are actually two separate titles within the Imperium of Man. Lord Commander is the military title. So whoever's the Lord Commander of the Imperium is basically general of all of the Imperium's armies.
Question.
Answer.
Is Gilliman considered the Lord Commander because he showed up before the Lion?
Yes, he claims the title of Lord Commander and Regent basically after he speaks again with the Emperor.
Right.
Where, again, we're not entirely sure what is said there, but he comes out and he's basically like, I'm in charge now.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, between the two, I mean, Gilliman comes back first, where I just love that we're in a period of Warhammer lore history that all the Primarchs are returning because they're the coolest characters, in my opinion. Between Gilliman and the Lion, Gilliman is the obvious choice for Lord Commander. The Lion has a very sus history.
Also, I don't think the Lion cares about being Lord Commander.
No.
I think he would do a really good job, but at the same time, he's too busy captivating and like chasing secrets. Yeah. And like also trying to like hide the fact that his chapter was like borderline traitors.
Yeah.
So he's like, maybe I'm not the best choice for this because stuff might get found out. Then we'd have to kill some more people. And then the whole traitor tag kind of sticks. And, maybe not.
Might not end well.
The Inquisition is already sniffing at my trail, so maybe not.
I mean, they would basically give him a slap on the wrist. They're like, you probably should have done better. And he'd be like, what the heck are you going to do about it?
They're like, did you know we worship your daddy now?
Oh, God. I hate that you said it that way.
We probably won't get into the whole issue between the Imperial cult in this episode, but keep in mind there's some tension there, and some battles are not worth fighting. But let's get back on track. RG is the commander of the Imperium and is also Imperial Regent. The biggest difference between those titles is the Lord Commander is the military title. Imperial Regent is the civil title. Now, most of the time, those titles are actually held concurrently because the Emperor was the one that had both of those titles previously. It was the Emperor, and then Gilliman had them, then he didn't, and then he did again. That's essentially like where we're going with this. And the Emperor is the only person that formally outranks Rabute Gilliman, but functionally he doesn't outrank Gilliman because we kind of find out that the Emperor doesn't actually care.
Because he's a corpse sitting in a chair.
Yes. Also, here's a fun fact for you guys. Gilliman is the only person to obtain this title twice, but separated by 10,000 years.
Convenient. I think it's so funny, the separation between the Horus Heresy and current 40K, because there's like 10,000 years that happens, and it's basically technological stagnation. But really what happened is like they just wanted to set it 10,000 years before, and they just didn't want to write about anything in the middle. It basically was a SpongeBob sign that they held up and were like, 10,000 years later. And they're like, oh, look, everything's basically the same. Anyway.
We kind of went backwards a little bit.
So each Primarch is known for having unique qualities. I'm reading your silly nicknames. Wow, that's jarring. Each Primarch is known for having unique qualities. Rabute Gillisuit is known for being a paragon among the Primarchs. He is an excellent statesman, he's an army strategist, and a superb duelist. The running joke is that all the Primarchs, except Lorgar, but that is another episode, basically got superpowers along with their already inhuman physique. Mr. RG, his superpower is using Excel, because he's a really good strategist.
In a more serious way, Gilliman is one of the best Primarchs as far as his leadership capabilities, which is really where you want somebody to be. The Emperor is functionally a deranged corpse with mind powers at this point. There's not a lot going on. Yeah, I know. Heresy! Keep in mind, like, you want your leaders to be good leaders. Like, imagine if Angron was the Imperial commander. He'd be like, hey guys, we really haven't been fighting enough wars. And they're like, actually, there's constant war. We've never been outside of war. And he's like, but what if we did more war? That's what would happen.
Wars within wars.
Whereas Rabute Gilliman, the ghillie suit himself, would be like, hey, maybe we like try to set these planets up for success so they're not just constantly fighting. So that's kind of the difference. The Imperium comprises 1 million worlds with trillions of people and quadrillions of assets, weapons, and moving parts. So having somebody with the superhuman intellect to manage all this is why RG is the man for the job.
So Gilman came onto the scene and was found by the Emperor on the planet Macragge. Fun fact, I didn't know how to say Macragge because I read it in books for 8 years until I heard someone else say it, and I go, oh.
What did you say?
I was pronouncing it Macridge.
That's fair.
Yeah, I feel like that was a pretty fair pronunciation.
The English language kind of sucks, so yeah, having only read it, that makes sense.
Kind of sucks. Anyway, he was found by a local warlord named Konor. Eventually, Konor was assassinated by a political rival, which moved RG into the position of king, where he brought Macragge under one banner and one rule. After this, he assumed command of the 13th Legion Ultramarines, and this takes us right into the Crusade.
So we're moving into big historical events here, guys. And obviously, we're going to start with the Great Crusade. This is where everything cool starts to happen for the Imperium. So the Great Crusade, if you guys are not familiar, we'll do a really quick, like 30-second info dump of the Great Crusade. Basically, the Emperor unifies Terra in what's called the Unification Wars. He brings the entire solar system back under one banner, and he's like, cool, but maybe we get a little bit more. Knowing that all of his Primarch sons are scattered amongst the stars, he launches all of his brand new Space Marines out into the galaxy, conquering planets left and right, and reunifying the Milky Way galaxy, and finding all of his lost sons. Boom, that's the Great Crusade.
Nailed it.
That was with no notes. During the Great Crusade, RG did a lot of conquesting for the Big E. He was very, very good at conquering planets. He was a prolific warlord and statesman, so many of the planets brought into imperial rule were reliably compliant, and that's very, very important.
Unlike, say, the Night Lords, who butchered their people, and as soon as the Night Lords would leave, they'd be like, okay, yeah, so we're going to immediately go back to what we were doing because these scary vampire dudes are not here anymore.
Pretty much.
Gosh, the Night Lords suck.
Side note for the Great Crusade, some planets needed to be reconquered. That's essentially what we're getting at here. Some legions would dominate planets with such ruthlessness that the populace would bend just long enough to regain their power and then rebel against imperial rule after the legions would move on. Because if you think about it, it's a lot easier to like corrupt a planetary governor like with bribes or chaos or something like that, and defeat a planetary defense force of just humans, then go toe-to-toe with the Astartes. So basically they were like, hey, let's just wait for these guys to leave, and then as long as we instill our values in the next few generations, then we could retake this planet. Keep in mind, Gilliman did not often have this issue, although no legion had a perfect compliance record, because the Ultramarines would exercise tactical control when taking a planet. Afterwards, the logistics network of the 13th would put that planet back on track to peace and prosperity. This is one reason RG was considered to be the paragon of the Imperium. He was considered the one that did it right.
Consider it like a game of Risk where you get like a massive deployment. You've been foxholing in Australia the whole game, and you finally turn in for a massive deployment, and now you're like skipping your way through like the entire world map. You're not going to leave like a lot of troops in each of the territories you conquer because that leaves less people for you to advance across the map. No, you're going to leave the minimum amount of armies through territories you just conquered and keep your spear tip as large as possible so you can continue to hopefully sweep the entire map in one turn. You know what I'm saying? It's the same thing for the Great Crusade. They kept all of the Astartes in the legions, in the spear force, or in the spear tip on offense, and kept none of them on defense.
Yeah, that's a very accurate way of putting that.
The Ultramarines Legion were so successful in building up its empire during the Crusade that the realm of Ultramar would also go by the name the 500 Worlds. This was very literally a small empire unto itself, a detail which will become important later.
Gilliman also commanded one of the largest legions, actually the largest. We'll get into numbers here in a little bit.
By a lot.
There are several reasons for this, though. They weren't just handed the largest fighting force. They had a lot of reasons that went into this. So the first big one is the 13th was known for being very tactical. I know that like there's a need for courage and heroism when you're fighting wars and things like that. Courage and honor is a common war cry for the Adeptus Astartes. But keep in mind that the 13th did not waste its legionaries needlessly. It is important that the lives of the Ultramarines were not just wasted away, dashed on fortresses, and thrown into the meat grinder. A sign of a good leader is knowing the difference between wasting your troops and spending them. No war is fought without casualties, so best utilizing your troops is necessary for long-term success of a campaign, and also keeping loyalty and morale high within your ranks. Tactics. Use them. It's effective.
Which is also why a significant portion of legions such as the World Eaters came to outright hate their Primarch, because Angron was like, the nails, they're biting, and all his troops were like, great. And then would go into a battle fury. Half of them would get killed, and yes, they were super effective, but their kill-death ratio was terrible.
Not great.
Bro, your KD ratio is pretty bad. And he's like, doesn't matter, still won.
It does not matter where the skulls and the blood flow.
Second, there were troops that are thought to be absorbed into the Ultramarines from legions that no longer have a face, name, or Primarch. It is a common fan theory that the 2nd Legion and the 11th Legion were absorbed into the Ultramarines after the Primarchs were most likely killed by Russ and his wolves, i.e. the Emperor's executioner. Why the Ultramarines got all these soldiers and say not the Luna Wolves, Dark Angels, Dorn's Dorks, or even like the Emperor's children, who's to say? But it seems like they all went to the Ultramarines.
If not an overwhelming majority of them went to the Ultramarines.
Yeah.
I mean, again, it's logistics. There could have been a few here, few there. I think it's an interesting point that you added the Emperor's children in here, because the Emperor's children had a little bit of a problem with like kind of low numbers, and then they came back. Very similar to the Thousand Sons and Magnus, but they were too magical probably to take in everybody else. Like they were like, hey, none of you guys are space wizards. The other legions can have them. So maybe that's what happened.
Yeah.
I don't know. This is just a Warhammer theory. The third biggest reason we see such a big force is as they were going through their campaigns, the 13th actually had a huge number of planets to pull potential recruits from. These factors, so based on those three things we just covered, was their tactics, the absorption of other legions, and a large recruiting base, all meant that the 13th Legion stayed very, very strong. Very, very populous. The Ultra Berets had so many Marines, it was even necessary to add new divisions within the Legion to better organize the fighting force, which we now know as chapters.
So not only were they the biggest Legion, but they were also hipsters.
Why is that?
They had chapters before it was cool.
Ah, there it is. So keep in mind how these chapters during the Horus Heresy were a little different. Sorry, Great Crusade. We're not in the Horus Heresy yet. My bad.
Spoilers.
These chapters were a little bit different. So Guilliman divided the Ultramarines into 20 chapters, each having 10 companies composed of roughly 1,000 Astartes each. So it was actually the companies that would later become chapters or successor chapters. So chapters were way bigger in the Great Crusade than they were post-Crusade. So just keep that in mind. However,
which is so rude compared to like the Thousand Sons, which are literally called that because their numbers were about 1,000 because of their curse that like made them like all die or whatever.
I don't know if they called it a curse when it was like first happening, but it was referred to as the flesh change.
Right.
Essentially, they had such a problem because of their psychic ability that their flesh would mutate spontaneously, and they'd have to put Marines down because they become these abominations of flesh and magic. And they're like, hey, the Emperor really doesn't tolerate this. Like, if it doesn't have 2 arms and 2 legs, or if it isn't making me enough money, he's not going to keep it alive. So the Emperor did not like mutations. Mutants, heretics, and Xenos were not looked upon favorably. So there was a decent amount of purging that went on.
Yeah. Meanwhile, Guilliman is like, oh, your legion is the size of one of my chapters. Like, oh, that's cute.
Yeah. So if you do the math here, guys, 20 chapters, 10 companies, 1,000 Astartes each, this actually puts the highest number of Astartes at a rough estimate of 200,000 Astartes. This detail is super, super important to keep in mind as we go into the Horus Heresy.
Which brings us to our next section, the Horus Heresy.
So at the beginning of the Horus Heresy, several events took place that were crucial in the beginning steps of this campaign. And this all revolves, it doesn't all revolve around Guilliman, but some of these events are specifically directed at Guilliman, so we thought it was important to include. So first off, the Istvan massacre happens. Basically, a bunch of legions get called in because they sort of tell the truth, and they're like, hey, there's traitor marines happening. Basically, a bunch of Primarchs answered the call, and they were like, oh, going down, time to murder another Primarch because nobody steps out of line. And then a bunch of legions got murdered. So real bad. The second event that happened was actually the warp rift that split the galaxy and basically clouded everything. During the Horus Heresy, the forces of basically chaos, or Horus at this point, they were chaotic at this point. By the time they made it to Terra, they were the forces of chaos. They just didn't know it yet. So, but the chaos gods basically entered into a deal with Horus, and Horus was like, hey, I'm going to do this. I'm going to kill the Emperor, your greatest foe. They had a lot of beef, and we won't go into why they did, because that's like another 5 to 10 episodes.
The Emperor is a complicated
and the Chaos Gods,
dude.
Yes. They basically said, the Chaos Gods were like, hey, we are going to shroud the entire galaxy in a warp storm, but we're going to allow you guys to travel. And so that warp storm basically made it impossible to travel from system to system. Not indomitable, but anytime you wanted to go into the warp, you were experiencing factors of more danger, and you probably weren't going to make it out, and you probably weren't going to get to your destination either. So they quickly realized, hey, we are functionally stranded where we're at. What happened was the galaxy gets basically divided. So this splits off the Ultramarines and the Dark Angels from basically being able to help. They actually don't know for a hot minute that this betrayal had happened, because word was taking so long to get through these warp storms. It was actually so crucial, in fact, that the Ultramarines be cut off from the rest of the Imperium, that the Word Bearers and Lorgar actually show up in the realm of Ultramar and basically launch a surprise attack on Kelth, a world that was being blighted by chaos, a world that became blighted by chaos in an attempt to cripple the Legion. If the Ultramarines were able to bring their 200,000 Space Marines and attack with attached guard forces, titans, and navies, and etc., to bear on the forces of Horus, would have gone differently. 100%. So it was very important that the Ultramarines were stranded and occupied.
It would have made the Battle of Terra one book instead of the 7 that we got. It would have been Horus's fleets arrived and then were immediately massacred.
It would have been a much faster. It wouldn't have been a siege, really. It just would have been the Battle of Terra.
Yeah. They might not have even got to Terra. They were like, okay, the Battle of Pluto. So especially the desecration of Calth, this event is actually covered in depth in the Horus Heresy novel, Know No Fear by Dan Abnett. And because it's written by Abnett, it's one of the best in the entire saga. Dan Abnett and Graham McNeil are the goats when it comes to Warhammer novels, in my opinion. One of my favorite moments from these books is when the Word Bearers finally strike. They end up landing a critical strike on the ship that Guilliman is on, and Gorilla Man becomes sucked out into the vacuum of space. And because the Word Bearers are stupid, they thought that would kill someone as powerful as a Primarch. Spoilers, it doesn't. And Rabute goes on an unbelievable killing spree after surviving in the void of space. And you know what? Now that I'm rethinking about it, and I'm going to add it back to my list of books to reread. It's awesome. They're like, yes, we've killed Rabute Guilliman, and he basically just floats through space, smashes through their ships, and kills so many Word Bearers. Oh, it's beautiful. It's beautiful. I hate the Word Bearers Legion so much. It's called the Horus Heresy, but it's the Word Bearers who caused the Civil War, and I hate them for it.
Absolutely. Not only that, but after the events of Kelth, there were actually additional assassination attempts on Mr. Gorilla Man. This was also via the Alpha Legion. So if you guys don't know, the Alpha Legion are basically the infiltrator Space Marines. They are one of the few Space Marine legions that specializes in stealth other than the Raven Guard. Now, being giant superhumans, most Space Marine legions are like, why would we specialize in stealth? We're giants with basically rocket launchers for machine guns. Let's do something else.
Yeah. How does one camouflage a tank? It doesn't.
Essentially what happened is the Alpha Legion basically sends in some legionnaires disguised as Ultramarines to fight him in one of his offices of all places. But they basically like show up and they're like, hey, we have a report to give you, where he's mostly unguarded and unarmored. And these Space Marines, who are dressed like Ultramarines, basically open fire on Rabute. And they're like, we're going to try to kill him. He takes some like minor wounds, but really nothing that bad. And he ends up like killing these guys. But he's pretty salty at not only himself, but like just everybody in general at this point, because he's like trying to deal with all of these new factors. And again, he's just like plagued with the stress of like, hey, we are stuck. There's a war happening. We can't really help out, like all these things. And so he's like, somebody is like trying to come in. He's like, you know what? Fine. Just come in. Like, tell me what you need to tell me. I have got bigger things on my plate right now. And they're like, we brought you frankincense, gold, and myrrh. Murder. And then they tried to murder him. And that's essentially what happened.
I was like, where the heck are you going with this? Oh, I see you.
Having survived these attempts and the Ultramarines and being successful as a whole, they still face the issue of the warp storm. So they basically were able to fight off the word bearers in most of the places, but they were like, hey, we're still stuck. The efforts of the traitor Marines were not able to eliminate the 13th Legion, but they did successfully keep Gilliman away from the Siege of Terra, which was their it was their secondary objective. Yeah. They're like, we would prefer him dead and his Legion destroyed, but if you can keep them away from Terra, that's the second best outcome, which they did. It was noted that this missed opportunity would end up costing the lives of many defenders on Terra. If the 13th had been present to fight off Horus, things would have been much more different. Sanguinius would probably be alive. The war would have been shorter, and they potentially might not even have made it to Terra. They might have been able to strike out previously. A lot of different things would have been very different if Rabute was there.
And if you guys haven't read the Siege of Terra books, this isn't really a spoiler, but really their defense doctrine was survive long enough until reinforcements can arrive. I know words. At one point during the Horus Heresy, or during the Battle of Terra, the Dark Angels actually do show up and do start to provide some support, but it's not enough to really sway the conflict enough until... which is why the Emperor finally does like pause what he's doing and then teleport strikes onto the Vengeful Spirit to just, he's like, no, this needs to end now.
Absolutely.
But I don't think the Ultramarines ever make it to the Siege of Terra during the siege, but they do show up basically right afterwards.
Yes. So this actually takes us into the second founding. And this is kind of where we start to get into the point where we get into the segmentation of chapters for the Adeptus Astartes. Basically, the Ultramarines arrive on Terra completely after the siege, and Ghillie Suit actually regrets this this is a deep regret of his, is not being able to provide support here. However, he realizes, I'm not going to just have a pity party and, cry about it. He's like, there's a lot of work to be done. Basically, the Imperium and Terra are reeling in the wake of the Horus Heresy. They had basically barely been pushed off, and there's still a lot of fighting that needs to be done. But after Horus is dead, the conflict was essentially at an end. So RG basically determined it would not be wise at this time to continue the existence of the legions in their current organization and split them into chapters. This is all, a lot of these events, keep in mind, guys, like the Second Founding, the Great Scouring, and things like that. These are all kind of happening fairly concurrently. They don't immediately dissolve everybody into chapters because they still have to push everybody back away, which we'll get into the Scouring here in just a minute. So just keep that in mind. We're bouncing around just a little bit.
And not all of the surviving Primarchs actually agreed that splitting the legions into chapters was even a good idea.
Exactly.
And so after the Battle of Terra, they were now down another Primarch because Sanguinius perishes at the hands of Horus, and the Blood Angels are basically driven bananas by his death. So they're like, okay, so that happened. How did we lose an entire legion? I mean, they end up figuring out hey, it's either called before they had the Black Rage or the Red Thirst, or now they have the Red Thirst. It's a color, has to do with anger. They have it.
Basically, the Blood Angels are tainted by corn, but they don't know they're tainted by corn. And that is not an episode. That is not a discussion we're going to get into today, but it will be in the future when we talk about the Blood Angels and Sanguinius.
Indeed. So personally, I actually thought the disillusion of the legions didn't make a lot of sense. I'm definitely on the side of like the chapters I feel like are a little bit ineffective when it comes to large deployments of space marines, which I felt like was still necessary in the 10,000 years to come. For starters, is a complete lack of oversight over an executive branch of government able to conquer the galaxy a bad thing? Yes, it is. Accountability is required, and there's basically none of it. I think the root cause of the heresy, though, was, well, Erebus being a sneaky little rat, and I guess the corruption of chaos. I think if the Emperor had actually educated his sons about chaos, things might have gone differently. He basically took the abstinence-only approach to teaching his sons about chaos. So once they found out about the dark gods on their own, they had no real knowledge or wisdom to deal with it. Not unlike sex, everyone in the Imperium encounters the warp and uses it basically all the time, and it is important to deal with it responsibly. All right, so that analogy is over before I say anything stupid.
Excellent. But very, very good point. Again, a little bit of education goes a long way. So
yeah, it's like, just communicate.
Then we go into another notable accomplishment of Rabute Gilliman, which is the establishment of the Codex Astartes. So not only did he split everybody into chapters, the Codex Astartes was also given to all these chapters as well. This was essentially the tactical handbook for all of the forces of the Adeptus Astartes. RG was known as the brightest tactician in the Imperium, maybe other than the Lion, but the Lion was too secretive. He really didn't have any need or want to share his knowledge. I think the Lion was actually the best strategist we had, but he didn't give two about sharing his knowledge. So we're getting essentially the handbook from Robot Girly Man. Being the brightest tactician in the Imperium, the master of strategy, he basically was known for conceiving theoretical opponents, stratagems, and all these different things, and basically had the entirety of the Great Crusade and the Horus Heresy to bring these things into practical application. You see a lot of that language as well when we're reading from the Ultramarines' perspectives, is they talk about the difference between theoretical and practical. Is the theoretical is like, this is what could happen, and the practical is the solution to like successfully complete an objective. And so they talk that way quite a bit. He basically took all of his thoughts, all of his learnings, and canonized it into the Codex. And so that's why when we're reading current novels, it's pretty common to know which chapters adhere really, really well to the Codex Astartes and which don't. And also them kind of using this as Space Marine law almost. Like Space Marines, depending on your adherence and like how much you take seriously the Codex,
it's their military code.
They get really upset when people break these. We actually see this with, let's use another Ultramarine as an example, Uriel Ventress. He basically like goes off the rails a little bit and has to serve a death penance to basically come back. Like he gets sent to a death world, and like Iron Warriors are like sieging it out or something. I believe it's Dead Sky Black Sun by Graham McNeil. You guys should read it. It's a really fun book. It's really old now, but it's still a fun read. That's a good example of this.
The 20th anniversary of that book should be coming out soon.
Oh, piss. Dang. I'm old.
Oh, my back.
Yeah, my back does kind of hurt. So that's essentially where we're at with that. Now, Andrew, I think it was a really interesting thought that you brought up, that you didn't like that people were organized into chapters. So I think this actually would be a good opportunity for you to go through the role of Space Marines and the role of the Astra Militarum when it comes to RG being the Lord Commander of the Imperium.
Sure thing. So the roles of the Space Marines, once the legions were split into chapters, their roles and responsibilities actually changed quite a bit. The legions were the frontline force of the Imperium. However, in chapters, because their numbers were severely limited, would now operate as a special operations force. Essentially, they had to be much more tactical and reserved than they once were. The Imperium had become so large, in fact, that Space Marines would only be deployed to the most dangerous and vital planets. There were just not enough of them to go around. And as far as the Astra Militarum, this is where the Imperial Army came into the picture. Being the largest military force by multiple factors, it was now the job of the Imperial Guard, well, to guard stuff. Like, they were the ones who are actually executing new crusades. Every new War Master for the Imperium was an Imperial Guardsman and not a Space Marine.
Do you mean not War Master, but Lord Commander?
No, I mean War Master. The title of War Master is used in the Astra Militarum in the 40K.
Oh, I had no idea. That's so cool.
Yes, it definitely is. Like, people are like kind of weirded out by it still, because they're like, okay, well, like Horus was a War Master and things got real weird real fast. But yeah, the Astra Militarum, I believe, still used the title of War Master.
Very neat.
I know, but they're also not Space Marines, so they're probably like, well, if one of us turns, like, we can still be killed by a las pistol. So
yeah, we're still super easy to take down. You guys can keep in mind that if the Space Marines showed up to assist the Imperial Guard, it basically meant it was a giant moment for whatever guard forces were there, and they were like, oh yay, reinforcements are alive, and then they look around, they're like, all their friends are dead, because that's why they're here. Keep in mind, guys, once Rabute Gilliman got back to Terra, he basically took up the burning blade of the Emperor and assumed command of the Imperium and Lord Commander Regent, and this would be the first time he takes up these roles.
So the Imperium needed leadership, and the Emperor had begun his immortal reign on the Golden Throne, i.e. he just sat back and did nothing. Rabute Gilliman would lead the Imperium in the Time of Rebirth, which was a process of reconstruction from an empire decimated by the Horus Heresy Civil War. Keep in mind, the Time of Rebirth happened after the Scouring, which we will actually discuss in the next episode.
With that here, guys, we are actually going to cut that, and we're going to save the rest of this for our next episode. So we just want to go out and say just a quick, huge thanks to all of our patrons. So Mike, Isaac, David, and Calmbrew, who's also our biggest supporter over on Twitch. You guys are the reason we do what we do. So thank you guys so much for supporting us. You also, all of you listeners, make sure you guys support us on Patreon for just $5 a month, so you guys can enter into our giveaways, which are still going on. We have like just a few more weeks left in our lightsaber giveaway. I say this and we're like, it's the end of June, it's going to be July soon, and we're drawing this in August. So seriously, there's only a handful of weeks left before we give out our lightsabers. Guys, we have quite a few tickets in here. I grabbed way too big of a jar for this, so it doesn't make this look like a lot of tickets, but there are quite a few. We add these tickets almost every single time we stream. So here's how you guys get added. Every time you support us on Patreon, you get a ticket added. And we actually still need to add June's tickets to this for our patrons. So we'll be doing that here in just a minute.
Yeah, so our June, July, and then August Patreon supports will get added. So there's very little time. So if you want to support us through Patreon, you still have enough time to get, I think, at least two more entries in.
Tickets just from that. And it gets you access to our Discord server, and it gets you access to all of our other content. It is going to give you discount codes for like our Etsy shop. There's a lot of different like benefits that come with that. So make sure you guys do that. It really helps out the podcast. Like, we're constantly trying to get better content out for you guys. And that involves getting new software, hardware, the time it's necessary to put in, because that's probably our biggest expense, is how much time we put in right now. So make sure that you guys help us out with that. And if you want a lightsaber, bingo, bango, bongo, get yourself a lightsaber.
Bingo, bongo.
Thank you guys so much for watching. We are going to finish this up and wrap it out. Every single one of you watching is amazing. Make sure to leave your theories in the comments here, guys. What do you think Rabute Gilliman is getting up to? We are a huge fan of checking out your guys' models, so you guys can see those over on Twitter and Instagram. We're hoping to post some more models just as we go throughout the week on our stories, just fun stuff like that. And if you guys want us to highlight some of your models or your builds, let us do that. We'd be happy to do that. So DM us over on those platforms. Make sure to subscribe this video. Make sure to like and subscribe to our channel. That really helps the video get pushed out to other people, guys. Seriously, like, take that second, hit that like button, comment down below. It could just be like nonsense. You could just be like, hey, I think you guys are just a bunch of stinky heretics. And we'll be like, oh, thanks.
That helps us.
It does. It seriously, it pushes it out. YouTube just sees engagement and it's like, oh, fantastic. This is great. Let's push it out to more people. So please do that. Guys, we are super close to 500 subscribers over on YouTube. I don't know if you guys know this, but 500 is a very significant number because it is the beginning threshold to being a YouTube partner, essentially. And that means we can start like financing more things because we are like, and that doesn't cost you anything, but it helps us make more money from this so that we can again make better products. So do it. Like and subscribe. Please do that. It helps us out so much. Like we're just very thankful that all of you guys took the time. If you guys are watching this all the way through, we've got about 53 minutes of raw footage that it's about to go up. It's always shorter than that because we, cut out all of Andrew's burps, sneezes, and coughs.
I'm a gross person.
Stuff. Yeah, he is. So I might keep
all hail the grandfather.
We'll all hail the grandfather. But seriously, guys, thank you guys so much for watching. And until next time, Rabute Gilliman protects.